Now that we've had an introduction to the idea of units, and specifically the SI unit system, we will occasionally see things that are not SI, but mostly we'll be dealing with things in that system. Let's talk about how we can convert from one unit to another. And this is the case, for example, if you're using something that's not an SI and you want to go to SI, or vice versa. And this concept is going to show up a lot in the idea of unit conversions and what we also call dimensional analysis. This is thinking about the units of the numbers that you're doing calculations with and making sure that you get to the right units by canceling units out. So let's talk about this idea of, well, first of all, the idea of a conversion factor. For some of you, this may be very familiar. For some of you, this may be a new concept. But just want to, this chapter 1, we're mostly laying the groundwork that's going to be important for everything we do for the rest of the semester. So let's say, for example, that I have a ruler. Do I have a ruler here? Oh, yeah. So I've got a ruler like this one here. And this is in inches on this side, and if I flip it over, this is in centimeters and millimeters on this side. But let's say I measured the length of something in inches. So let's say, I measured that my finger is, I don't know, 2.75 inches long. What if I wanted to know what that value was in centimeters? So we need some way to go between inches and centimeters. And what that is what we call a conversion factor. And what that factor is something that tells us how many inches are in a centimeter or how many centimeters are in an inch. So this is a conversion factor that I happen to know off the top of my head. And this is actually an exact conversion factor that 1 inch, we often abbreviate inches with just IN, is equal to 2.54 centimeters. So an inch is longer than a centimeter, so you need 2.5 centimeters roughly to equal an inch. So how can we use this conversion factor to convert this 2.75 inches into centimeters? And this is where the idea of dimensional analysis comes into play. So this conversion factor right here, we can rewrite this as a fraction, where we have 1 inch on the top and 2.54 centimeters on the bottom. Or we can actually, and because those are equal to each other, this is just equal to 1. So if we have a value and we multiply it by this fraction, including the units, it won't change that value. It'll change the units, but it won't change the value. Or we can do that the other way around. The 2.54 centimeters can be on the top of the fraction. And since they're equal to each other, this is still equal to 1. All right, so algebraically, this is what we're doing. Essentially, what we're doing is taking this, dividing by 2.54 centimeters. That cancels and gives us the 1 on this side and the fraction on this side. Okay, so how do we, so if before putting any numbers in here, let's say we have, just thinking about units, we have something in inches, and we multiply by a fraction here. And this is the idea of dimensional analysis, and it goes in with unit conversions. If we have something in inches on the bottom and centimeters on the top, without putting numbers here yet, we can think about our inches as sort of a thing that can cancel out. Much like if we were multiplying, say, 2 times 3 halves or something like that, right? These 2's can cancel out, and that'll just give me 3. In this case, it's our centimeters that are left behind, and our final value will be in centimeters. Let's look at this in action with my value from up above, my 2.75 inches. Let me scroll down and give myself a little bit more space. So 2.75 inches, and then we want to multiply by a conversion factor. Now we have 2 different options here. We can multiply by the 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters, or we can multiply by the 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch. Which one should we use? I encourage you to pause the video, think about it, and once you have an answer, let's move forward with it. And you can double check and see if you agree with me. So what we want is something that has inches on the bottom so that we can cancel out the units. So that means we want to use this conversion factor here, where our 1 inch is on the bottom. So we'll put 1 inch on the bottom here, 2.54 centimeters on the top here. All right, and now I'll go ahead and pull up my calculator here. There it is. And so I'll put in 2.75 inches times 2.54 centimeters per inch. Gives me a value of 6.985. We'll actually round that to 6.99. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So 2.75 inches is equal to 6.99, roughly 7 centimeters. And just to emphasize here, I'll usually do this when I do unit conversions, is I'll cross off those inches, leaving the centimeters, and that's how I know that my final answer is in centimeters. So this is a simple example of a unit conversion and a dimensional analysis. To make this a more generalized version of this, we have something that's in has some initial units. We multiply by a conversion factor that'll have the initial units in the denominator on the bottom of the fraction and our desired units on the top of the fraction. So that's just generalizing from our example that we just did. That'll give us the desired units here. These initial units are going to cancel. So that's the basic introduction to unit conversions and dimensional analysis. I'll do one more example in the next video, and then we'll talk more about why I limited myself to 6.99 here, even though I had more digits in my answer.